Hello and welcome to Red Cup Conversations. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. If you're watching us on television, you're doing so on Lake Sumter TV, Comcast Channel 13, Bright House 498, and CenturyLink Channel 83. So today we have the privilege of being able to speak with Leesburg City Manager, Mr. Al Minner. And hopefully we'll get a little bit of enlightenment on some of the recent achievements and what you might be looking forward to in the future. So thank you very much for coming on to the show.
Kris, my pleasure. Always love to talk about Leesburg, so it's good to be
This
here.
is the place to do it.
All right.
So let's start off by telling our audience who don't already know a little bit about you.
Okay. This is actually my 6th year here in Leesburg as the city manager. I've been in the city manager profession, believe it or not, about 25 years now.
Really?
Yeah.
So this isn't the first city.
No, yeah, it's not my first rodeo. But no, I grew up in a little town in Maryland, actually across the river from Leesburg, Virginia. Imagine that. So we're still in Leesburg.
Destiny.
Yep. Graduated undergrad at Frostburg State University out in Western Maryland, Shippensburg University in South Central Pennsylvania, where I got my master's degree. And then I got into the city manager gig and been there ever since. So
what compelled you to get into city managing?
Well, where I grew up, these days it's not too rural, outside Washington, D.C. and Maryland, but in those days it was. It was a little town near Barnesville, Maryland. It's kind of farm area. My dad was a commercial airline pilot. He worked for American Airlines.
Okay.
And when he wasn't doing that, he was kind of a jack of all trades, and he liked to farm and had a construction company. And so I was his sidekick. And so
Naturally.
Growing up, you did all sorts of stuff. So always kind of did the working on the farm and the kind of like the public works kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then always had an interest in politics. Went to college, didn't know what I wanted to do. Kind of gravitated into the political science and history thing. And from there, I graduated and was like, what am I going to do? I'll go to more school. So I got my master's in public administration and kind of stumbled into the city manager thing, and it seemed to fit pretty well. We do lots of different stuff. It's political for sure. We do a lot of different projects, from streets to roads to electric to water and sewer to all that stuff. So it was the best place to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. So here you go.
And
that's how we got into it.
You said a couple of things that I don't think people give enough credit to. You see the big items that, in growing cities and towns, but you neglect all the small ones, like rerunning, again, electricity, piping, water. All of that. Cities are not simple,
they're
projects.
They're diverse organizations. I think sometimes, we like to bust on government about being not efficient and you spend too much money, but they're really complex organizations. They're not structured to make money. They're structured to provide service and improve community and do these different things. And so, obviously we got to do those things efficiently and wisely. But really, government is not like a business, and it's not supposed to be. It's got a totally different mission. And those things are good. They're supposed to work together.
I was about to say, they're supposed to work together because businesses and local government in general, but businesses and local governments really need to work hand in hand for that, whatever community they may be in.
Absolutely have to. I think government's role there is to be a facilitator, and we're really a product of the community. So the better we work together, and the more diverse folks that we can get together to come to a group with different missions and put it all together, I think then the better your organization. And I think that's what Leesburg does really good. And
I think so as well. I'm basically an implant, but been here 5 years, a little over, and I've seen Leesburg change a lot.
Yeah,
really, just in the last 5 years.
We've done a lot in the last few years.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Now it might be a new sign here or a new entrance into Main Street, but there are bigger projects, smaller projects, which is why I got a kick out of when you're from the surface up. There's a lot going on in a city. There really, really is.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, just over the last year or so, what are you I want to ask, what are you most proud of? But can you tell our audience a little bit about some of the achievements that we've seen recently in Leesburg this year?
And we always talk, and I'll digress a little bit.
Sure.
But we always talk about the stuff that everybody sees.
Right.
And what we're seeing now with the Venetian Center and those type of things, I mean, that's a culmination of about really 4 years of work. So digress. When the commission hired me, I think there's a little bit of change on the commission, wanting to be a little more progressive, wanting to tackle projects in Leesburg, kind of catch up. I think there was this overall feeling in the community that Leesburg was behind.
In what way?
I think.
I mean, if there were any specifics?
Well, I think Leesburg is in this geographic conundrum, or it was about 6 years ago.
Sure.
And at that time, the region, the country is really coming out of the recession. It started in 2010.
Right.
That lasted 3-4 years, about the time they hired me. And so everybody's kind of on the go. But even in that time, there was still a little bit of growth. So I think the Villages won. So up in the northwest corner of Leesburg, if you will, that massive growth of the Villages and that
is
stuff.
massive.
And on the southeast side, you had the massive growth of Orlando. So you kind of have that leaking up to the Mount Dora corridor, your way, the Claremont corridor. So it's kind of, lakes that goofy, two boxes put together. So growth here and growth here, and Leesburg over in that northwest corner, kind of stuck in between everything. And so even as close-knit as we are, in those regions, they saw growth, and you saw Tavares kind of rebrand themselves. Mount Dora always does great. Claremont just busting at the seams, and then over Sumter Way, that's all growing because of the Villages. And Leesburg was kind of just geographically in that center spot where I think it got behind a little bit because of economy, but I think more because of geography. And so I started in 2013. Today, exactly.
Is that right?
Yeah, today's my anniversary.
Well, happy anniversary.
So with that being said, the interview process was the commission had some missions. Quality of life was one of those. And so we got into the making the goals of we want to do improvements around Venetian Gardens. We want to tackle blight. We want to do these things, and we don't want to spend much money. So that was the task. So that's what we've been working on.
That's the task.
Do all these things and don't spend any money.
Right. Exactly. And again, it's a rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
Change quality of life. That's a sentence. It's a statement. It's a phrase. But in order to achieve that, I mean, how many different aspects are you focusing on for that one specific goal? It takes everything around you, it seems to me, applies towards that, whether it be jobs, job possibilities, places to shop, places to eat. I mean, quality of education. What is your definition of quality of life?
Well, from all those things go into it. Quality education obviously is very important. You got to have good schools that attracts people to your region. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's not my bailiwick. I'm the water sewer project guy. So on the biggest accomplishments, I think there are probably 3 or 4 that people see. And the first one's obviously Venetian Gardens. The plan there was to recreate Venetian Gardens, reinvest in it, and make Venetian Gardens so that it's an attractor and brings people back to the basin and the region. So we started out. We did a charrette, fancy word for getting public input and getting people's input on what the priorities were and how can we improve it. And I think that's something we do very well in Leesburg is we really we've got great participation from the business community and the public.
For sure.
And then I think we mend it together pretty well. So we came up with a 3-point plan, and that was first the Roger Park improvements, where we put in the new splash pad and the new play equipment
Right.
and the new pavilion. Then we tackled Ski Beach and put in the walking trails, the decorative fencing, recreated the old boat ramp, the
Right.
decorative lighting.
I forgot about
and
that.
then that spun into trying to create more of a destination point around what was Dozier Circle. We renamed it Dozier Court, and relocating and using that 5-acre area in the basin or Venetian Gardens to be a centerpiece and use it highest and best purpose. So we built the new community center, which we dubbed the Venetian Center, and we set it up in a way that it was more attractive. You could see the vistas and the lake and get more of a lake experience. We're the Lakefront City.
Right.
Put more of a lake architecture into the building. And then the next part is kind of some of the commercial adventures that we want to get into, which is the new restaurant, which should be starting here in a few months, hopefully
Right.
open this fall. So that was a great goal. We accomplished it. We accomplished it in about 4 years. And then the other side of that goal, so everybody sees that, but the neat thing about that goal was we did it cash. We didn't do any deficit financing for it. We didn't do any debt for it.
Is that right?
We've spent probably close to $14 million now between those 3 projects. And so the financial vehicle that we put together on that is something I'm really proud of. Just not beyond the projects and how they do it, but how we financed it. And we've just I think we're very conservative when we budget. We and it's kind of the old principle of plan for the most, but you never quite accomplish that. So
Right.
you budget your revenues extremely tight and your expenditures at that level, and
Right.
then generally that can create some cushion, which ultimately brings reserve cash and those type of things and how that rolls. And so we were able to put together some good savings. I got to give some credit to my predecessor in Jay Evans, because I think he did a lot of stuff to react to the deficit, to where the organization really battened down the hatches, and that just put everybody in that conservative mind frame. And so basically we generated that cash through that period of time when we didn't do a lot of things, and then we were able to sell the fiber utility. And we got a great deal on that concept, and then that generated the ball of cash. So we've been whittling away at that now for a few years.
Yeah,
and that's how we got it done.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And again, a lot of people do keep up. They follow what's going on,
They
which
do.
is good. And
Yep.
that's that watchful eye, right?
Yep.
That's what we need. But so many of us, and I say us because I'm no different in a lot of things. You just see a new building,
Yep.
and you hear a headline here and there, but you don't really pay attention on what it takes to get that raised or improved.
Yep.
And that's why I enjoy having guests like you on the show that kind of open up the eyes and remind us that there's a lot more to it than just politicians, spending money.
Yeah,
But-
if you're building a house with your spouse, and you know how difficult. You love your spouse, and they're the best parts of your life. But
Right.
when you're doing something like that, it's difficult. So just take that and then put somebody who you're not as close with. Right,
Right. Or maybe just
a
meeting.
friend,
Right.
and then not just one, but 5.
Yeah.
And then go build a house with a city commission. And
Right.
it's that's what's just different about government, and I think people see waste in that because you spend so much time arguing or coming to a compromise. Where business is kind of myopic. They got one singular goal: it's make money. And that's a
Right.
good one. And so when everybody's focused, you can have a board of 18 directors, right? But their goal is make money. And don't care how you do it. Just do it. And if you are, success.
Right.
And government's not like that. You've got 5 people on a city commission, and they've got 5 or 6 different ideas. So now you got 5 times 5. So you got 25 goals, not one, with 5 different opinions on how you get there.
Right.
So I always try to say there's goodness in collective wisdom. You got to trust the wisdom that comes out from a collective body, And generally it is pretty good because if everybody's working together genuinely, which Leesburg's done well, we come up with some good products. And I think the past 6 years has showed that in Leesburg. From the Venetian Center to the road improvement stuff that we've done to the lowering the electric rates. We did that about 4 years ago. We came up with a 4-point plan that made us one of the highest municipal electric utility rates in the state to just about average, which was a big jump. That was a big plan. The wastewater treatment stuff that we did. And then, of course, I think the villages is probably the other big accomplishment.
Of course. And I'll tell you what, we need to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'd like to start talking a little bit about the villages.
We'll do it. All right.
All right. We'll be back in a moment. Hi, and welcome back to Red Cup Conversations. Again, I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. So we're going to continue our conversation with Leesburg City Manager, Al Minner. And before the break, we were talking about, I don't want to say the difficulties, but just wrapping our minds around the idea of what it takes to get the collective to pull together to achieve an end goal, or to complete a project. And you started talking about the villages, and I do want to get into that, but just for my own sake, and hopefully for some of our listeners, just take a basic project. Who comes up with it? Is it just the city, the commissioners, or do you know what I mean? Where do you get your ideas? Like, let's say the Venetia Gardens or the pool or something like that. Say, this is what the public wants, and do you stem out that way, or is it all you?
It's
or not you, but the local government.
The city provides, let's say, 3 or 4 different services, and so depending on what the genesis of that project is, kind of dictates the origin of who came up with the concept. When we look at ideas like the Venetian Center or the Resource Center or those type of things, those are typically community driven. And they come from the commission. So public input. Like we said in the last session there, when I was interviewed, the commission had this goal of wanting to improve quality of life. And so those commission-driven goals, I think, probably start with the commission or commissioner two or all of the commission. That branches out into the public feedback, like through charrette process. And so those projects are definitely commission-driven. They're high profile, they're quality of life, they mark Leesburg. Then we can get into different projects like, here's a good one that nobody knows about. We're about to spend $5 million on transformers. It's like, what? $5 million on transformers? Look, you even flinched. Yeah. Where did that project came from? Well, that was a staff-driven project, but we've got a 25,000 customer electric utility. Utility is a pretty small niche. Not a lot of folks know about it. When everybody turns on the switch, they expect the lights to come on.
Exactly.
And if the lights come on, good. And then when you go pay your bill, it can't be too much. So that's about the extent of it. So there's basically 3 ways that electric is provided in the state of Florida, really the nation: an investor-owned utility like FPL, a co-op where it's a group of folks who come together, create a board, and nonprofit action kind of group that selects its own board of directors, and then municipal electric utilities. So we're a municipal electric utility, and so it's a niche. And so as we're monitoring 25,000 customers, we're tapped into the grid. So you got a high voltage that comes in, you got to get it to a low voltage, then we step it down again and to get to your house. Yep. So that big step from those transmission lines to the substations, you've got those big transformers. You've driven down the highway when you see those big things sitting on a truck. They're expensive and they're really important. So we're starting to get old, and we went through a process of identifying where we have some issues, maintenance type of programs. We identified that the life expectancy was going out on them, and we basically said, hey, We need to get these programs to change out. We presented that to the commission. So that's a big project. You don't see that a lot.
It's not razzle dazzle,
but it's
but
not,
the
but
need
it's
is
really
severe.
important.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's a good way to put it. Razzle dazzle generally comes from the commission. The bread and butter generally comes from staff. And that's, I don't mean to be disrespectful to the elected officials, because sometimes you when you get a group of those folks, you'll have a couple of bread and butter folks that are into that stuff, and you'll have the folks that are in the razzle dazzle, and it's all important. It's all equivalent.
Oh, of course. Sure.
And then when you get the fire services, those type of things. The general services can be a mixed bag of community input and staff, so it's really collective on the genesis of a project.
Sure. Now, I've got to ask: do you ever, through the eyes of a city, do you find that you're competing against other cities?
Absolutely, in a good way and a bad way. We do a lot of stuff. There's competition for attracting business. There's competition for attracting residents. And so if you're not keeping up with the Mount Doras of the world or the Tavares of the world, you're losing your market share, right?
Right.
If you're looking around for a new place to live, a new job to be, you've got to stay up to shape. You got to keep your corridors clean. You got to do these projects. You got to keep your taxes low. And absolutely, you got to compete.
That's something that I've always really, it takes place, but is there pressure? And I think it does, just based on that explanation. I guess there is. If you want to bring people in, new homes, new housing, it's not a simple, I don't want to say idea, but running a city and cities in general, local government, people spend too much time focusing on big federal. I don't want to say too much time, because that's important. Mm-hmm. But it's happening right here 2 blocks away from where you live. There's a lot going on in your city.
I think there's 14 cities in Lake County, something like that.
Yeah,
so there's about 14 city managers and a county manager. So there's 15 people in the county who have kind of the same job. And so there's an esprit de corps, because, we all fight the same fights. We all have the same war stories. We all go to the luncheons and cry about how hard our lives are when they're really not. But so I think there's a friendship and an esprit de corps to it. But we also know we got to be doing our jobs, and we're all pretty prideful folks. We want to do the best job. We want to have the best city. So I think we're friendly, but I think we're also pretty competitive. I think if you got another city manager in here and said, I don't care what Minter's doing over in Leesburg. I think about what Darren's doing down there in Claremont all the time. Yep. So like I said, I think the neat thing about it is I think there's an esprit de corps to it. But come on, we're competitive.
But again,
I got to get you to move to Leesburg. You know, come on.
Yep.
So
it's a necessity,
but it's healthy and it's good.
Right, and that is, you can have both. Yeah, that's a good point.
You can.
Healthy competition is not a bad thing, because overall it makes everybody's. Who here lives in one of our cities and doesn't spend time in the other?
Yeah.
Live in Leesburg, spend time in Mount Dora. Live in Mount Dora, spend time in Eustis or Tavares or Leesburg. Yeah. And I'm naming the bigger ones for North Lake. But so let me ask you about the villages, because I've heard just through people I associate with and speak with, some people are like, yeah, villages, killing it. My family actually lives down in the Brownwood area.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, you hear people going, oh, the villages, they're growing so large. Good or bad for the citizens of Leesburg?
It's better than good. I think it's fantastic. But let's start on the negative side about the villages.
It's on both sides, just because they're thinking traffic and things of that nature.
And that's exactly where I was going. There's that. Unfortunately, there is that NIMBY syndrome, right? Not in my backyard.
Sure.
And we'll dive into this a little bit too. But I think there is this sense that once you've moved to Florida and you've retired to Florida, you've got your little piece of paradise, and then there's no more. And that's important, and that's we have a job to protect quality of life. And you know, there's the natural resource draw, and when we're going to run out of water and these type of things.
Right,
now we have lots of professional people who work on that. But the other side of the equation with the villages, and I would say it's the super majority, that they recognize that the villages is such an economic engine. So to dive into this a little bit, when I got here again, there was the idea that we were going to use what we refer to as the 470 property as an industrial park.
Okay.
And it's a tract of about 1,500 acres at the intersection of the Turnpike and 470. Mm-hmm. And the city acquired it early in 2000. Actually, even before that, it was back in the 80s when we acquired it.
Okay.
Through a grant from the EPA for effluent disposal. Long story short, fast forward from the 80s when the property was acquired to the 2000s, and the concept of the industrial park came up. And so just briefly, Florida has, I think, always struggled to find an economic identity. You know, so let's go to 1945 Florida, after World War II. 1 million people lived in Florida.
That's it.
But after the war, you know, then we started getting those the folks. And so in 1945 Florida, I mean, that is like the agrarian agricultural Florida, that kind of,
for sure.
the cracker
Citrus
and
groves,
and it was this region of Florida, you know, the Lake
Right.
County, the Polk counties, the ridge of Florida, the Gainesville, those old Florida cities, as I call it. That was the heartbeat of Florida, and there were cattle, and there were agricultural, and there were citrus, and that went on really until the freeze, right, in the 80s,
yeah,
and with some ties in of growth. And so then, you know, after the freeze came, citrus started pushing down, different things started happening. And Florida's always struggled to get an identity. A guy named Walt Disney built that park down there.
For sure.
You know, down in Miami, the sun is great. And so we had this tourist economy. We've had this agricultural economy. We have this retirement economy that comes in. And we've tried to branch off in different things. And our feet part, that we called it the industrial park, was that we tried to lure the companies to build widgets. And I'm not going to say there's no widget building in Florida, because when you talk about economic development, that's generally what you talk about. We're going to get Ameren to come in and build frost-free evaporators for a refrigerator, or we're going to build a little part that's in your airplane that nobody, or your car, or the button on your shirt. You know, that's what
Bits
people think of it. And then, you know, the old capitalist economic development, and that's kind of, I think, what people think about. And that was the city's plan, was to use this property, bring in companies, create jobs.
Sure.
We're not
sound theory.
We're not good at that. Okay, we work hard at it, but Florida in general, in my opinion, is not good at that. But what we are good at is we're good at tourism.
Yes.
We're good at retirement. And retirement is a huge industry.
I was about to say, it's not just a way of life now. It's an industry.
It is an industry, and it's about construction. I mean, look at our unemployment rates when the bubble burst in 2010. How many folks lost their jobs? And
right.
Contractors, electricians, plumbers, mechanics, carpenters, drywallers, painters. You know, those guys and ladies have kids.
Yeah.
And they go to school, so you need teachers. And then people get sick, and you need doctors. And then people go out to eat, and you have restaurants. And so when those folks come in, you know, they create a huge service economy. And
as demonstrated by the villages.
The bottom line is the villages brings a huge service economy that puts off untold jobs. And so you see the impact of that, and their expansion, I think, is critical to the state. It's critical to our region. And now, you know, we talked in the previous section about Leesburg kind of being stuck with this economic engine of the villages up here, and this economic engine of the Orlando down there, and us in the middle. this one is finally getting to us. And so we capitalized on it. So when the villages approached us being the city, to purchase our property for expansion for the villages, I want to say that was December of 16. We did the contract in May of 17. We went back to a pro forma, and we had to present to the city commission, hey, we've been trying to go this path, and this is what it will lead with the widgets. Not a whole lot.
Tried it.
We're not doing real good.
Right.
We have to sell our soul to bring these companies in, lose tax revenue, and we got one. And credit to Mike Rankin, he did a great job bringing in Course Lab, which is the biggest industry that we brought in at that property. And we put a pro forma together as if we use tax abatement, which we won't get tax money or ad valorem money because we got to leverage that to bring in the companies. And if we can get 25 companies, and if they employ 15 people each, maybe we'll get a $200 million investment out of that property for taxable value, because that's our ruler. The villages, on the other hand, they're going to build houses. Just in the 1,500 acres that they purchased from us, we know they're going to do about this many units an acre. Their house is worth this. You add all that up together, that's $750 million. The villages also has a reputation of saying, when we're going to build, they build.
Yeah, they do.
They do.
They don't back out.
And so it really became, commission. Do you want us to keep going down the track of economic development, traditional economic development, which is important, and get maybe $200 million of new investment for the region, or do this and get $750 million?
And it's proven.
And it's proven. So it was a no-brainer. So we sold the property to the villages. We made some other partnerships with them for our utility systems, which helps us create revenue and some enterprise funds. And so it's been a great marriage so far. Their schedule is to they're moving into what they call the Carter area. Now they'll be in that area, and then they'll move into our 470 area, which they're calling the villages of Westlake. Should be about 2023. So about 3 years away, we should start seeing some dirt move out there. So it's a real exciting time.
Pretty exciting. Well, Al, thank you so much for taking the time out of, I'm sure, a very important day.
It's always my pleasure. My pleasure.
And I'd love to have you come back sometime.
Anytime. I love to brag on Leesburg. So
and rightfully so.
It was a pleasure.
Rightfully so. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Red Cup Conversations. We'll see you next time.